No single law that was just there made in black and white to be like that for the next million of years to come. We all are of the understanding that laws change because people change, because situations change. Now, if people in government had that in mind, that they're serving the people of South Africa and that their interests are in the people of South Africa and not whoever walks into the country, I promise you that our leaders, our policymakers, our people in departments would be going in coherent with what the people are saying. But the reason government is pulling this way and the people are pulling that way, and now we find ourselves sounding as if we're talking two different languages, is because we have a government that does not listen to the people, that wants to keep regurgitating this thing. The Constitution says the Constitution is meant to be serving the people of South Africa.
All right.
That's why even when you have any law in the country, it goes back to making sure that the citizens are protected, the people who vote are protected. There's not a single policy maker in the country that sits there and says, oh, I want to draw a policy because Zimbabwe must be great again. It must be about South Africans. And that's why we're going to make sure that we don't get silenced by this thing of the Constitution says, because we are of the view that our government people, our officials are misinterpreting the law because they want it to sound like it's meant to serve everyone in the globe. The Constitution of South Africa is for South Africans. Therefore, we ask all the people implementing policies to remember to put South Africans first, or else don't ask us to vote for you. Go and get those votes from outside and those people that you're trying to please.
And Mr. Mavuso, you know, when you hear such sentiments, you know, that's just also a drop in the ocean. There are many broader voices as well, because now the sense is that you have a government that is out of touch with its people. Just as we wind this conversation up, I want to hear from you in terms of how do we allay all those fears from South Africans, and how do we sort of find common ground around this? Because there is a need for us not to be talking on top of each other, but also to be working hand in hand together in terms of finding all of those solutions that might be of assistance at this particular point in time, seeing that also that, you know, such important policies are at such a sensitive stage.
No, thank you very much. So just to explain that this white paper is not about, you know, causing any confusion, but we want to create a rule-based and secure and economically responsive migration system that works for South Africans and lawful migrants. And I think I must indicate that South Africa is not an island, that we will not have people visiting South Africa, closing all the ranks. But what we are saying, we want to strengthen national security and the sovereignty of South Africa. So I think that's a first. We also say we want to have a clear separation between immigration, between asylum, and also citizenship pathways, because we are agreeing that we cannot have a situation where we have people who are illegal in the country, people who are getting fraudulent documents. Let me explain. Sometimes some of those fraudulent documents Jacinda is making a reference to is fraudulent documents that are not even appearing in our system. In other words, they look alike. They look like our documents, but they're not in our system. You know, it's the same way as a person who will have a fraudulent banknote. You know, I find it very interesting that when someone carries a fraudulent banknote, nobody blames the Reserve Bank. But in this instance, when someone has a fake document that is not even appearing in our system, obviously it looks like Home Affairs has produced it. But just to deal with this, what we are saying is that in this review or reform, we want to move from an open-ended migration to skills-based and demand migration, because we want to be able to ensure that whatever that we do, we are able to have a balance in terms of critical shortages of skills. We want to attract investment so that South Africans be able to work. We want to ensure that infrastructure and industrialization is prioritized. So through all these reforms, that's what we are trying to do as government. And I think the real issues around South Africans, yes, it is true that South Africans have been overwhelmed. And I explained this thing to in one of the interviews when we were being asked whether South Africans are xenophobic, and we still believe South Africans are not xenophobic. I think South Africans were overwhelmed because of some of the legislation that we created and which happen to have been abused. That is why when I tell you about 2008, 2009, that we recorded over 200,000 arrivals on asylum seekers. So those are the things that overwhelms communities, because the very same people who arrive and claim asylum, they go straight into those communities and live there. And we do accept that there is a need to review that. There's a need to reverse some of those issues to ensure that communities are able to settle in a manner that, one, they are in living spaces where government can be able to provide services. They're in living spaces where they can be able to be protected, but also to ensure that government takes the responsibility in the role of managing the issue of asylum seekers and migrants. That's exactly what we are doing. I don't believe that we are being quiet when we see what is happening on the ground. We are not quiet, but also we cannot be reckless as government in terms of how we respond to these issues. We need to respond in an orderly manner that is also lawful, to ensure that we do not allow any situation where there's a tension and violence between those who are South Africans and those who are foreigners. Our role is to mediate, to ensure that those who are supposed to return to their countries of origin, they return in an orderly manner, so that they can be able to say, if they were to come to South Africa, they come lawfully, because our role is to ensure that the admission of those who come into the country is done lawfully. We accept also that we have porous borders. That is something that we cannot run away from. That is why the Border Management Authority was formed. Part of its responsibility is also to manage the line.
All right, Thomas, thank you both so much for your time and insights on the program. Jacinda Ngobese-Zuma is from March and March, as well as Thulani Mavuso, who's the Home Affairs spokesperson. Thank you so much.
I did not put anything on that white paper, and I'm going to explain this why. What's my reason why I didn't put any submission on the white paper? Now, you cannot paint over a structural failure. You could not paint over structural failure. And I'll try to explain this using engineering, structural engineering, not politics, right? So when engineers design buildings, they don't start with paint. They don't start with just painting around. They start with soil testing. They test the soil. Before any single wall goes up, we have to employ a geotechnical engineer. And the geotechnical engineer, what does is that measures the soil bearing capacity, right? It measures the groundwater levels, the settlement risk, and the shear strength. That's why we need a geotechnical engineer before we can start building a house. Because the reason why is because the foundation transfer the entire structural load where we're going to build a house into the ground. So if the soil is weak, say it's sandy, building a house on the sand, it's unstable or waterlogged, what would happen really is that the building may look fine initially, may look like, oh, super dope. But over time, you will get differential settlement. You will get cracks in load-bearing walls. See the cracks? Just bought a house. Oh, the cracks. Door frames that no longer align because there's a shift. Foundation heaves. You get a foundation heave as well. And then you get the final thing is the structural shear stress. The shear stress, if you see all of that, yeah, you cannot fix that foundation, really. You cannot fix the foundation failure with a surface treatment, trying to repaint the walls, trying to patch the cracks with plaster. You can try to reinforce the facade. You can try to patch the cracks. If soil is weak, say it's sandy, unstable, or waterlogged, the building may look fine initially, but over time you will get differential settlement, cracks in your load-bearing walls, door frames that no longer align, foundation heave, structural shear stress. Now, here the key principle is that you cannot fix foundation failure with surface treatment. Surface treatment will be like, like painting the walls, trying to patch the cracks that you see with plaster. You can try to reinforce the facade, but if the substructure is unstable, stress will reappear over and over again, and you will be wasting your money. Eventually, under pressure, when you have heavy rain, flooding, seismic movement, the structure fails. It will fail. The structure of that house will fail. It will just collapse. The house collapsed because it was built on the sand. A house that is built on a sand eventually collapsed, not because of what was inside it. It's because of what supported it, what supported the house, the soil. So we can translate it into a constitutional language that the Constitution is the foundation. The legislation is the load-bearing structure, regulation and interior fittings. So this white paper on immigration, the one I didn't put submission on, that one is just a paint. It's a paint. So if the foundation, the foundational doctrine governing sovereignty, governing citizenship, and rights allocations contains unresolved structural tensions, because the South African Constitution in it contains unresolved structural tensions, then policy reform becomes cosmetic. It may change the appearance, it may change the language, what they're trying to frame, how they try to frame this, how they try to spin it, political spin it. It does not change the load. This white paper will not change the load. And when pressure increases, when you see high number of illegal immigrants into your country, like South Africa, democratic movement, economic stress, administrative incapacity, cracks begin to show. The real question is not how do you repaint the system. The real question is the foundation distributing the load properly? No engineer will sign off on a house that is settling into unstable soil. That's why I didn't put my submission. We need the constitutional amendment first. Then look at all of that stuff that I've just mentioned, the legislation, the regulation, then the white paper.